Across millions of years and countless species, one weapon has consistently defined the success of carnivores: the jaws. Iconic hunters like big cats, bears, and birds of prey do wield formidable clawed limbs, using them to pin down struggling victims. Yet, when it comes to delivering the killing blow or efficiently processing a carcass, nothing rivals the functionality and ferocity of a well-adapted set of jaws. Indeed, since its inception and initial usage by terrestrial macro-predators, the jaws have been used for just about every aspect of predation, whether it be killing, catching, or restraining prey. These predators, dubbed headhunters, are few and far between today, only truly being represented by canids, hyenas, and varanid lizards among extant terrestrial macro-predators, whereas the vast majority of modern predators are made up of predators who use their limbs heavily for prey restraint, also known as grapplers. However, during Earth's past, headhunters were far more prolific. The Mesozoic, for example, was absolutely teeming with headhunters, with the Triassic Age giant cruritarsans and the giant theropods of the Jurassic and Cretaceous being almost entirely made up of predators who used their jaws as the sole weapon for catching and dispatching prey. The early days of the Cenozoic didn't see a huge shakeup in the world of headhunters. Instead, predators that relied on their jaws continued to dominate the scene in surprising variety. Most of these top hunters were reptiles, like the infamous terror birds, Forus rachids, giant flightless birds packing razor-sharp beaks built for delivering deadly slashing bites. Along them roamed a host of crocodilomorphs, the sebecids, planocraniids, and macosuchians, each armed with powerful jaws that made them serious contenders on land. But the mammals were no slouches either. The Cenozoic's mammalian hunters were just as diverse. From the mesonychids, hoofed carnivores that probably looked like a cross between wolves and ungulates, to the entelodonts, weird, early hippo relatives who weren't picky eaters, happily munching on everything from roots to fresh meat and bones. Yet, when it came to jaw power taken to the extreme, one group ruled the roost: the Hyaenodonts. These mammals pushed jaw-based predation to new heights, evolving massive skulls, bone-crushing bites, self-sharpening teeth, and some of the most fearsome jaws in mammalian history. And leading the charge was the ultimate icon of the clan, Hyaenodon, the razor-jawed predator that terrorized the Paleogene badlands and became the poster child for headhunting mastery. Despite the name, Hyaenodonts aren't actually related to modern hyenas. They belong to a completely separate branch of carnivorous mammals and stand out as some of the earliest hypercarnivores in the Cenozoic fossil record. Their story begins right at the dawn of the Age of Mammals, during the Paleocene epoch, roughly 66 to 56 million years ago. Back then, these early Hyaenodonts popped up in Eurasia, branching off from a group called Forae, a family tree that also includes today's carnivores, pangolins, and some extinct predators called oxyaenids. At first, Hyaenodonts weren't the top dogs. They were more like small, tree-living mid-level hunters, living in the shadows of bigger predators such as the cat-like oxyaenids and the hoofed carnivores called mesonychids. But even in these early days, Hyaenodonts were specialized killers. They had large, sharp, carnassial teeth designed to shear meat off bone, and interestingly, they lacked the crushing molars found in less specialized carnivores. This made them more like modern cats, which rely almost exclusively on meat rather than a mixed diet. One of the coolest things about their teeth: as Hyaenodonts aged, their upper and lower cutting teeth rotated in opposite directions to maintain a razor-sharp edge throughout their lives, a perfect adaptation for a life spent biting deep into prey. Fast forward to the Eocene epoch, and things started to shift. In Europe, the first truly large hyaenodont appeared, Kerberos langobardriae. This lion-sized predator, tipping the scales at around 140 kilograms, about 308 pounds, was a game-changer. Its limbs were stiff and built more for walking and stability than climbing or grabbing, while its skull was massive, about 35 centimeters or 13.8 inches long, comparable to a brown bear's, and supported by powerful neck muscles designed to handle its bone-crushing bite. Kerberos was a glimpse at what hyaenodonts were becoming, top predators with jaws and bodies built for taking down big prey. Still, despite this bright spot, most hyaenodonts remained stuck playing second fiddle to bigger, more dominant predators for millions of years. Then came the turning point, the Grand Coupure, around 34 to 33 million years ago. A rapid cooling caused by a drop in atmospheric carbon dioxide led to drastic habitat changes and a massive extinction event, one of the biggest since the dawn of the Cenozoic. Many of the era's dominant megafauna disappeared, including the reigning apex predators like oxyanids and mesonychids. With the old guard wiped out, hyaenodonts finally got their moment to shine. They stepped up as the new top predators, not just individually, but as a whole clade, ready to dominate the changing world of the Oligocene and beyond. When hyaenodonts finally snagged their spot as top predators, they didn't just sit back. They evolved in some pretty dramatic ways. Early hyaenodonts still had flexible, dexterous limbs, inherited from their ancient foray relatives, which helped them climb and grab prey. But as they moved into the apex predator role, those nimble limbs gave way to stronger, stiffer legs, built for speed, stability, and explosive power. So, if they lost some limb finesse, how did they hold on to their prey? They turned to their jaws, massive, powerful, and downright intimidating. Their heads ballooned in size, equipped with jaws packed full of teeth designed not just to kill, but to lock down struggling prey and keep it from escaping. This shift in body design marked a major milestone in hyaenodont evolution, the leap from small-time hunters to dominant carnivores ruling the food chain. But the story doesn't stop there. Alongside these anatomical upgrades came a burst of diversification. Once they rose to the top, hyaenodonts spread far and wide, giving rise to all kinds of new species. In Europe and Africa, the heavyweight champs were the hyaenaleroids. These giants, including the lion-sized Kerberos, were talked about earlier, evolved powerful, bone-crushing teeth that moved away from their ancestors' slicing style. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, East Asia and North America were ruled by the Hyaenodontoids. Unlike their Western relatives, these predators stuck with the classic slicing teeth of their ancestors, working like guillotines to tear through flesh. But the real star of this group was Hyaenodon, the very namesake of the Hyaenodontoids. Hyaenodon popped up in Europe during the Eocene, between 42 and 36 million years ago. At first, they were nothing special. Small, relatively modest predators roughly the size of coyotes or jackals. Species like Hyaenodon brachyrhynchus and Hyaenodon minor weighed in around 17 and 8 kilograms, 37 and 17 pounds respectively, and many are even smaller. Like most hyaenodonts of their time, they lived as mid-level hunters, overshadowed by bigger predators. But after the Grand Coupure, Hyaenodon spread eastward, colonizing Asia and North America, and diversified not just in range, but in lifestyle. By the end of the Eocene, while some species stuck to their mesopredator ways, others began evolving into specialized, large apex predators. By the dawn of the Oligocene, around 33 million years ago, these big Hyaenodon species had become the first truly dominant apex predators of their genus and of the entire Hyaenodontoid clan, developing a suite of adaptations that made them supremely fit for ruling their ecosystems. Before the Grand Coupure, Most members of this genus were modest, often no larger than a coyote or jackal, but after the extinction event swept away the old apex predators, Hyaenodon began to scale up dramatically. Among the first of these new giants was Hyaenodon horridus, a wolf-sized predator that dominated the Oligocene ecosystems of the White River Badlands in what is now the western United States, weighing around 40 kilograms or 88 pounds, and reaching up to 60 kilograms or 132 pounds at maximum size. It might not sound especially massive by apex predator standards, yet even this was nearly double the size of its smaller pre-Oligocene relatives. But Hyaenodon horridus wasn't the end of the line. Far from it. Sharing the same region was an even larger brute, Hyaenodon megaloides, which tipped the scales at about 165 to 170 kilograms, 363 to 374 pounds, roughly equivalent to a full-grown male lion. Impressive, yes, but the true heavyweight of the genus was Hyaenodon gigas. This colossal species, which emerged in Mongolia near the tail end of the Grand Kapura, reached body weights exceeding 250 kilograms, 551 pounds, with some estimates pushing past 300 kilograms, 661 pounds. That put it in the same weight class as a polar bear, making it not just one of the largest hyaenodonts, but one of the largest terrestrial mammalian hypercarnivores of all time. With that kind of bulk, Hyaenodon could bring down the massive herbivores that roamed its world. But its dominance wasn't just about size. These animals had evolved a body plan perfectly tuned for a hypercarnivorous lifestyle. Hyaenodon's limbs had lost the flexibility of their arboreal ancestors. The forelimbs were stiff, designed not for grasping, but for running and holding steady under strain. Yet, what they gave up in dexterity they gained in raw function. Hyaenodon was built for movement. Its long, relatively slender limbs enabled a cursorial lifestyle, allowing for bursts of high-speed locomotion. From a distance, its body plan might have conjured comparisons to wolves or wild dogs, and while there's some superficial resemblance, Hyaenodon was something altogether different. Despite its running build, its limbs were shorter and more heavily muscled than those of modern canids. That trade-off meant a slower top speed and less endurance over long distances, but in return, it gained explosive acceleration. Rather than long-distance chases, Hyaenodon likely relied on ambush-style attacks, closing in fast and hard, more like a big cat than a wolf. Once it reached its target, its robust limbs and powerful frame allowed it to hold down and overpower prey in close quarters. Its body reinforced this strategy. The ribcage was wide and barrel-shaped, more brawny than the narrow, deep chests of wolves. The kind of thoracic structure suggests that Hyaenodon was a broad, heavily muscled animal, built more for grappling and overpowering. But if there was one anatomical feature that truly set Hyaenodon apart from modern wild canids, it was the neck. Though its overall silhouette might have looked canine, the musculature of its neck told another story entirely. Heavily built and anchored by towering dorsal neural spines, much like a bison's hump, Hyaenodon's neck was a powerhouse. These adaptations not only supported the weight of its massive skull, but also enable it to withstand the intense lateral forces created when prey animals struggled. This was a predator designed not just to bite, but to hold on, locking down on its victims with a tenacity few carnivores could match. Once it caught up to its prey, it didn't let go, using its jaws like steel traps and its stocky, reinforced body to absorb every kick and thrash. Hyaenodon could engage in prolonged battles of attrition and win. All the traits that made Hyaenodon a deadly predator, its size, speed, and build, were really just supporting cast. The real star was its skull, and not just any skull. This thing was massive, both in absolute terms and relative to its body. Take Hyaenodon horridus. This wolf-sized specimen had a skull over 33 centimeters or 13 inches long, longer than that of a fully grown male tiger. And then there's Hyaenodon gigas, a bear-sized monster with a skull nearly 60 centimeters, around 2 feet long, comparable to a large Nile crocodile. That's not just big, it's excessive. But that oversized head had a purpose. In predators that kill with their mouths, headhunters like wolves or hyenas, a larger skull means more room for teeth and more leverage for biting. Hyaenodon didn't just lean into this strategy, it maxed it out. Its jaws weren't just long, they opened wide. To make that possible, Hyaenodon lowered its jaw joint and shortened its cheekbones, creating a massive gape perfect for latching onto large prey and delivering devastating, slashing bites. However, despite its fearsome look, Hyaenodon may not have had a particularly powerful bite. One documentary estimated Hyaenodon horridus could bite harder than a lion, but the science behind that claim is murky. Anatomically, that wide gape came at a cost. Reduced jaw muscle room means less crushing force, so it's possible Hyaenodon's bite wasn't as strong as you'd expect. But that's the thing, it didn't need brute force. Hyaenodon wasn't built to crush, it was built to cut. It inherited the slicing dentition of its ancestors, long canines, oversized carnassials, and most importantly, laterally compressed teeth, flat, blade-like edges made for shearing flesh. Modern canids have similar teeth for slashing wounds into prey, but Hyaenodon took it further. Bigger skull, wider gape, sharper blades. A single bite could tear flesh deeper and more effectively than almost any mammalian predator alive today. Thanks to its skull-heavy design and reinforced neck, trunk, and limbs, we can piece together how Hyaenodon brought down its prey. It likely stalked from cover, then launched into a short, brutal sprint, closing in fast. If it got close enough, it didn't hesitate. It hit jaws first. Against prey its own size or smaller, that initial slam was probably enough to knock them clean off their feet. A quick bite to the skull or spine, and it was over. But larger animals were a different story. Those first bites usually landed on the hindquarters, and that's when Hyaenodon locked in, holding on like a pit bull, tearing into flesh with its blade-like teeth. Flanks, legs, rump, anywhere soft and vulnerable. While the prey struggled, Hyaenodon's thick neck, solid core, and planted limbs kept it anchored until the victim collapsed. And if it didn't bother to finish the job with a clean kill, then its prey died the hard way, eaten alive. This killing style wasn't just for small game. The larger species, like the bear-sized Hyaenodon gigas or the lion-sized Hyaenodon megaloides, could tackle nearly anything they shared the landscape with. Even Hyaenodon horridus punched above its weight, probably taking down prey much larger than itself, just like modern wolves do with moose or musk oxen. All of this made Hyaenodon one of the most dangerous mammalian predators to ever live, cutting down prey not with brute force, but with sheer anatomical efficiency. And it had the perfect hunting grounds. In Asia, Hyaenodon gigas and others roamed the semi-arid floodplains of the Urgilian-So Formation, a prehistoric savanna full of antelope-like leptomericids, Chalicotheres, rhinos, and towering Paraceratheres. Plenty of prey for a giant carnivore. In North America, Hyaenodon megaloides and Hyaenodon horridus thrived in the lush, swampy world of the White River Formation. Herds of early camels, rhinos, oreodonts, and tiny horses filled the floodplains. Whether it was Mongolia or the American West, Hyaenodon didn't just survive, it ruled. A mammalian headhunter without mercy, armed to cut down anything in its path. But Hyaenodon didn't rule unchallenged. In both Asia and North America, it had rivals, plenty of them, and many were formidable in their own right. In Asia, Hyaenodon pervagus shared its hunting grounds with nimravids, like Aeophilis and Nimravus mongoliensis. These were saber-toothed, cat-like predators built for ambush. Aeophilis was small, bobcat-sized, and no real threat. but Nimravus, about lynx-sized, could stand its ground. Still, the two likely avoided direct conflict thanks to different strategies. Nimravids stuck to dense cover, ambushing prey, while Hyaenodon thrived in open habitats, chasing its quarry down. The real powerhouse, though, was Hyaenodon gigas, a bear-sized monster that didn't fear much. It was likely the apex predator of its time, but even it wasn't entirely safe. Sharing its turf were Entelodonts, like Brachyhyops and Entelodon gobiensis. These pig-like omnivores were giants, over half a ton, and probably behaved a lot like modern grizzlies, muscling in on kills and stealing whatever they wanted. While they weren't specialized predators like Hyaenodon, they were definitely a nuisance. But if anything could challenge Hyaenodon gigas head-on, it was Mongolestes, a massive, late-surviving mesonykid, clocking in at around 250 kilograms or 551 pounds. Like Hyaenodon, it was built for high-speed attacks and powerful bites. It may have hunted similar prey, and if the two ever clashed, it would have been a brutal, neck-snapping brawl. But even here, ecological partitioning, different times, places, or diets likely kept bloodshed between these giants to a minimum. Over in North America, the story was no less intense. The White River Formation was one of the most predator-packed ecosystems of the late Eocene and early Oligocene. Hyaenodon horridus was right in the middle of it all. Above it were big carnivores like Hoplophonius and Eusmillus, jaguar-sized nimravids with saber teeth and attitude, plus the omnivorous giant Archaeotherium, an entelodont that might have been the largest predator on the plains. And then there were the weird ones, like Bathornis, giant predatory birds that looked like secretary birds on steroids. Hyaenodon horridus may not have topped the food chain, but it was no pushover. Against smaller rivals, lesser nimravids, small Bathornis species, and even tinier Hyaenodon species, it ruled with savage efficiency. One fossil even shows a Denictis killed by a bite through the skull, courtesy of a Hyaenodon. Brutal, but effective. And thanks to its preference for open country, it likely had less direct competition from forest-loving nimravids. Entelodonts were omnivores, not full-time predators. That left Hyaenodon horridus as the dominant headhunter of the floodplains, comfortably seated at the top of its niche. But Hyaenodon's reign, as fearsome and dominant as it had been, was not built to last. By the close of the Oligocene, Earth's climate took yet another dramatic plunge, echoing the frigid upheaval of the Grand Coupure that had once shattered the Eocene world. And just as those earlier climate shifts had spelled doom for the archaic predators of the early Paleogene, so too would this new wave of global cooling seal the fate of Hyaenodon. The same forces of extinction that had once cleared a path for their rise now circled back to claim them. As temperatures dropped and ecosystems shifted, Hyaenodon entered its final act. One not of quiet disappearance, but of a bold last stand. In the early Miocene, around 20 to 19 million years ago, the genus produced its largest and arguably most impressive representative, Hyaenodon wellini, a hulking predator that roamed the dying days of its lineage like a relic of a fading empire. And then, just as suddenly as they had risen to dominance, Hyaenodon vanished from the fossil record, the last of the Hyaenodontoids swept away by time. Yet, even in extinction, the story of the great Hyaenodonts did not end. While the Hyaenodontidae were fading into prehistory, another ancient branch of the family was just beginning to reach its prime. The Hyaenaleroids, long shadowed by their Hyaenodont kin, surged into prominence during the early Miocene, and they did so with a vengeance. Out of Africa and Eurasia arose the titans of the clade, Hyaenalorus sulzeri, Simbacubwa kutokaafrica, and the most colossal of them all, Megistotherium Osteothalastes, predators that would claim the title of the largest hypercarnivorous land mammals the world has ever seen. Through them, the legacy of Hyaenodon persisted, not in name, but in form and function, in power and purpose. And even beyond the fossil record, Hyaenodon's shadow lingers. Its rise marked a turning point in mammalian history, the first time Hyaenodonts stood unchallenged at the top of the food chain, carving out a new ecological niche as apex predators in a world still recovering from the fall of the dinosaurs. Their story is not just one of survival or extinction, it's a story of dominance, innovation, and terrifying success. In every sense of the word, Hyaenodon earned its title as the undisputed headhunter of the Paleogene Badlands.